this episode, we talk about Jesus and the missing years of his childhood that we don't know about. And we talk about some of the crazy theories out there.
Hello and welcome to TGI Monday, where this week we're talking about the missing years of Jesus' life. We had a question come in from Hazel, who emailed us, tgimondayshow@gmail.com, and she asks, when did Joseph die? Did Jesus have brothers and sisters? There seems to be a big chunk missing in the life of Jesus, things we never hear about in church. Great question, Hazel. So there are various bits to that, starting off with when did Joseph die and did Jesus have brothers and sisters? So Hal, do you want to maybe just tell us about that, Jesus' family, and what we know about it?
Well, as far as when Joseph died, we don't know a lot about that. We just have some sort of ancient traditions about he died before Jesus entered his ministry, and he's never mentioned in the Gospels past the first couple of chapters. So there's that. As far as brothers and sisters, it's a bit complicated because the word in Greek for brothers and sisters can also mean cousin. So it's similar to African languages, whereby basically the way you understand a brother or sister is the same way you understand a cousin. So I've got African people in my family, and they understand that in their eyes that I'm their brother, even though they're my cousin.
And the other thing that's a bit complicated is the male and female language, isn't it? So if it just says brothers, that could easily mean brothers and sisters. But we do know there are references to Jesus' brothers in the Gospels, and in particular James, the brother of Jesus, who goes on to become quite important.
That's right,
in the early church. So I think we're fairly confident that Jesus grew up in some kind of family setting.
Yeah, this is a question which depends upon your church background. So for the Roman Catholic Church, it's quite important Jesus doesn't actually have brothers and sisters, but they are his cousins, because the Immaculate Conception it depends upon Mary never having any children. So I don't think it's a really important question, but it's an interesting question, isn't it? It doesn't really necessarily affect you if you're a Protestant evangelical, but if you're a Roman Catholic, I think it...
I disagree.
Go for it.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it won't surprise you to know that I love the mystery about, what was going on in those periods of Jesus that we don't know about. There's loads of legends, some of which are completely off the chart about...
I enjoy them.
Yeah,
I like them.
He went to India and trained as a yogi, all sorts of things which are really interesting. But I was... I like the thought, in terms of my faith, that Jesus was a person who will have gone through, let's say, adolescence, and the example of him standing up in the temple and saying, in the synagogue, that bit, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and this scripture's just been fulfilled in your hearing. I quite often like to think about it, because I've got a 12-year-old, from his mother's point of view, going, all 12-year-olds think they know everything and that they can rule the planet. So when Jesus said that, I often think about how Mary mothered him.
Yes.
And so when my 8-year-old, who's still, when he'll have been cute at 5, precocious at 15, all of those things which actually
But the thing is, that's the problem,
us.
though, isn't it, with throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Sometimes I think in the Protestant tradition, we're so keen on sort of countering sort of these ideas about the ever-virgin Mother of God and things like that, because it's to do with the doctrine that Mary is ever-virgin, not that she's immaculately conceived. But it's to do... We forget that Jesus is a real human being from a real human family. And if we forget that, we lose the whole message of the gospel. Because really, the lovely part of that, where Jesus goes back to his own town, is they say things like, I know you. I know you. And if it was today, you'd be like, who does this bloke think he is? I know him. He put my kitchen in last week. Come on, shut up. And I think we lose that.
We do. But it is interesting, isn't it, that the gospel writers, other than that one incident in Luke's gospel where we do get the 12-year-old at the temple, and do you remember his parents can't find him, and he's like, come on, did you not know this was where I was going to be?
Obviously.
I'd kill him.
Other than that one moment, the gospel writers don't really talk about him growing up at all. So we get the birth narratives in Luke and in Matthew, but otherwise the focus is all on those last 3 or 4 years of his life. And I don't think that's an accident, is it?
No, it's not.
It's because they've got a particular message.
But it's not
they're
a
trying
wild.
to communicate.
It's not a wild mystery, I
Yeah.
think. So some people like to look at this kind of white space in the Bible, and they say, well, Jesus must have gone off to India or Tibet or another planet or wherever it is he's gone, and then he's come back and started his ministry. But actually, as Hal just pointed out, when he went to Nazareth and preached in the synagogue, people just said, "This is the carpenter." Why is he saying? They knew
down the
him.
road, like.
It's a bit going back to our Star Wars analogy that we often use. It's a bit like trying to say, well, the first 19 years of Luke Skywalker's life is a mystery, and therefore all kinds of amazing things must have taken place. It's a big secret. But actually, he grew up.
Yeah.
But he didn't get married. He didn't do the things that would have been expected of someone who'd stayed in their hometown. I find that stuff really intriguing and fascinating, and not a hindrance to faith.
No.
And it's that reality that a person, and actually I'm nosy about all sorts of people's lives, but particularly about just thinking,
is it intriguing?
I wonder.
Is it intriguing just because it's interesting and nice to speculate, or does it matter to you?
It matters a lot, I think. It's part of how I pray too. So when I'm, struggling with something or thinking about something, I'm also saying to God as I'm praying, what was it like for you when you did you ever have anybody do that to you? I bet you did. And that's why it really matters, because actually Jesus comes with us.
But it's to do as well with the idea that Jesus discovers his vocation in the same way we discover it, because he's human as well as divine. So the idea is that Jesus doesn't sort of magically work out that he's the Son of God overnight. He gradually comes to that conclusion. And I think that's vitally important. But if we look at the Gospels, what we do see is that in Mark's Gospel and in John, it's utterly focused on the Passion.
Yes.
And really, that's the point of it is the Gospels are written with the Passion at the centre of them, deliberately.
Yes. So I was just going to read, because John makes that very explicit in his Gospel. He says, this is John 20, verse 30, Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. So even the sort of 3 or 4 years that they're focusing on, he's saying, I didn't write down everything.
No, it wasn't.
But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and by believing you may have life in his name. So he's a very clear purpose for why he's writing and therefore what he's selected.
But he's saying what he's saying is this book is about who Jesus is, not what Jesus did. That's the point.
But these missing years sometimes can sound very exciting, and people will use those years to try to write a story about Jesus to undermine a lot of the church teaching.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a sense of we all want to make Jesus in our own image. I've had people from the New Age movement say that Jesus was a New Age person. I've heard people say that Jesus was a kind of almost like a yogi up in Tibet. I've heard people who believe in UFOs say he was an alien. I've heard socialists tell me he was a socialist, and we all try to make Jesus in see, there we go.
Definitely.
There we go. But the point is that we all try to make Jesus in our own image, and those years in the Bible are a spot where people grab onto and say, this is where we can make Jesus that person that we need him to be. When actually the Bible does say he just grew up.
Yes. And I think that's not a new impulse. So, we have what are called the infancy gospels. Documents that come from, 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, well after the New Testament was finished. And people do get very hung up
Except
on...
the Gospel of John. Thomas, sorry, except the Gospel of Thomas.
It comes from the 2nd century. It's not that close.
175 AD.
Anyway, but the point is, those are Gospels that have never been accepted by the church, that have never been recognised in the same way the other Gospels have. I just wanted to recommend this called the Authentic Gospels. It's 3 lectures by Cambridge scholars, the third of which is specifically about the lost Gospels of Thomas, Judas and Mary, and showing how that they don't really fit within the rest of the church tradition. So they may be useful to people. Sorry, Hal, we really need to something very quick to say.
All I was going to say is the other thing to remember as well, that Dan Brown is a made-up story.
Yes, good point.
And as well, that those Gospels were never banned. No. They were just said that they are not they shouldn't be read in church.
Exactly.
And I've got them all in my study.
Yeah, they're very interesting, but they don't have the same authority. So that's a good point to end. Dan Brown's made up lots of made up stories, but actually the gospel writers knew what they were doing. They wanted to include what they wanted to include, and so we can be sure we know what we need to know about Jesus, the human, and as well as Jesus who died for us.
And that French actress in the film was nice, wasn't she, in that Da Vinci Code?
Okay, good. And if you want to watch the Da Vinci Code, you're welcome to do that on your own time. We'll see you next
With
week.
the French actress.
So thanks for watching this week. If you've got a question to ask us, we'd love to hear from you. We can't get all the questions on the show. We do read them all, appreciate them all, and we have a chat about all of them as well around the show. So like us on Facebook, watch us in various different locations, and we'll see you next week.